I never imagined that a single evening could feel like both a lifetime and a heartbeat all at once. The sky outside my small apartment was painted in shades of violet and silver, the kind of colors that only appear just before night swallows the last light. I sat at my tiny wooden table, a mug of tea warming my hands, the steam curling upward like fragile ghosts. Outside, the city murmured softly a distant siren, a car door slamming, the faint laughter of someone passing by, but inside, it was quiet. Almost too quiet. I liked the quiet. It made me feel safe, like the world had pressed pause just for me. I spent my evenings here, tucked in the corners of life that no one seemed to notice. I would read or sketch, or sometimes just watch the shadows crawl across my walls. Life was simple, predictable, and for the most part, comfortable. At least, it had been, until tonight. The first hint that something was off came in the way the air felt heavier than usual, like it was holding its breath. I noticed it first as I lifted my mug. My reflection in the dark window caught my eye, though it looked slightly different. The streetlights outside flickered once, twice, then steadied, casting elongated shadows that seemed to reach toward me. I blinked, shook my head, and laughed softly. "You're imagining things," I whispered to myself. But the unease didn't vanish. It lingered like a quiet hum in my chest, a tension I couldn't explain. I tried to focus on my tea, on the warmth seeping through my palms. But my mind kept wandering to the strange feeling. Something was watching, or waiting, though I had no way of knowing what. I turned toward the window again, and that's when I saw it, a shadow that didn't belong to anything I could recognize. At first, I thought it was the corner of a tree, or perhaps a trick of the light. But as I stared, the shadow moved in a way that felt deliberate, almost purposeful. My heart sped up, a flicker of fear and curiosity mingling in the same pulse. I told myself it was nothing, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that my ordinary world, the one I had carefully curated with routines and quiet nights, was about to be interrupted. I sipped my tea, listening intently for any sound beyond the hum of the city, the clink of my mug against the table. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, I heard it, a soft, measured tapping at the window. Not loud enough to be a branch, not frantic enough to be the wind, just deliberate, patient, as if someone or something knew I was there. My breath caught. My hands froze around the mug. I told myself it had to be my imagination. Yet, somewhere deep down, I knew better. There was a weight in the air, an expectation, a pull towards something I couldn't see, but could somehow feel in my bones. My apartment, my life, my safe little corner of the world. Everything felt fragile now, as though it existed on the edge of a door I wasn't yet ready to open. Then, a second tap, soft, like the brush of a feather against glass. My pulse raced, not entirely from fear. There was something compelling in the sound, almost intimate, as if it carried a message meant only for me. I approached the window slowly, cautiously, my fingers tracing the cool edge of the frame. Outside, nothing appeared, except for the shadows. They shifted in ways that didn't obey the streetlights or the trees. And then, as I leaned closer, I glimpsed a figure, a presence both familiar and impossibly foreign. Standing still in the silver glow of the street lamp dot, I couldn't see their face, but I felt their gaze, piercing through the glass and into me. It wasn't threatening, not yet, but it was insistent, demanding attention, claiming a part of me I didn't even know existed. A shiver ran down my spine, and I realized that I had just crossed the invisible line from ordinary into something else, something I couldn't name. I stepped back, my heart thudding in my chest. The figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the whisper of the wind, and the faint echo of its presence. My room, my safe little haven, suddenly felt too small, too ordinary for what was coming. I sank back into my chair, the mug trembling slightly in my hands. A part of me wanted to run, to hide, to pretend that nothing had changed. But another part, a deeper, quieter part, knew that my life had already shifted. That tonight, something had chosen me, and whatever it was, it wouldn't be satisfied until I followed its pull. I wrapped my hands around the mug, holding it like an anchor to the familiar, yet unable to ignore the stirrings in my chest, the way my pulse thrummed with anticipation and fear. The night outside stretched endlessly, silver and dark, hiding secrets I had yet to understand. And somewhere beyond my window, something waited, something patient, something inevitable. And in that instant, I knew. Nothing in my ordinary life would ever feel ordinary again. The morning after that strange night, the ordinary world felt different, though nothing had changed outwardly. My apartment was the same, books neatly stacked on shelves, the faint aroma of last night's tea lingering in the air, sunlight spilling lazily across the floor. Yet, the air seemed heavier, charged in a way I couldn't explain. As I moved through my routine, I felt a subtle tremor beneath the surface of my thoughts, a sensation that whispered something extraordinary had entered my life. I poured my coffee and watched it steam, the curl of vapor rising like a silent invitation. For the first time, I noticed the way the sunlight caught the edges of objects in the room, making even the familiar feel new. My reflection in the kitchen window caught my eye, and I paused. Something about myself looked different. My eyes seemed sharper, my senses more alert, as if the world had become sharper, clearer, almost alive in ways I hadn't noticed before. A shiver ran down my spine, and I quickly shook my head, telling myself it was nothing more than imagination, that the unease, or perhaps curiosity, followed me out into the city. On my walk to the small bookstore where I worked, I noticed details that had never registered, the way the wind whispered through the trees, the way shadows lingered at corners longer than they should. Faces passed me on the sidewalk, but for a fleeting moment, one in particular caught my attention. A man, or at least a figure that seemed human, stood across the street, half hidden in shadow. His presence was brief, a single blink of recognition, yet it felt intimate, like a memory brushing against the edges of my mind. When I looked again, he was gone, leaving only the echo of something important, though I couldn't grasp what. The feeling followed me through the day. Simple tasks, arranging books, helping a customer, seemed tinged with an unusual energy, as if the air itself had shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet persistent. I found myself pausing to listen to quiet sounds. The creak of the floorboards, the rustle of a page, the hum of the city outside. Each noise seemed meaningful, carrying a resonance I couldn't name. It was as if the world had opened a layer I had never noticed before. A layer where magic or fate could slip through unnoticed if I wasn't paying attention. In the afternoon, a gentle rain began, soft drops that tapped the windows in a quiet rhythm. I pressed my forehead to the glass, watching the water ripple across the street. The rain blurred the city lights into soft halos of color, and in that haze, I thought I saw him again, the figure from last night standing just beyond the street lamp, his silhouette unmoving, watching. My heart skipped a beat. I blinked, and he was gone, leaving only the reflection of my own wide-eyed face in the wet glass. That evening, I returned to my apartment feeling both exhilarated and unsettled. Nothing had directly changed, my life was still my life, but the sense of something approaching, something beyond comprehension, was undeniable. I found myself drawn to the window, staring at the moon rising over the rooftops. Its silver light spilled into my room, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits. And in that glow, I felt it. A pull, faint yet insistent, as though something or someone was reaching for me across space and time. I shivered again, not from cold, but from the recognition that my ordinary life had been quietly, irrevocably altered. Then came the moment I could not ignore. A soft knock at the door, deliberate, measured, patient, echoed through my apartment. My pulse quickened, yet I was not afraid. Something about it felt familiar, as though I had been waiting for it all my life without knowing it. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob, my mind racing with possibilities that made no sense yet felt inevitable. Slowly, I turned the handle. The hallway beyond was empty, dimly lit by the flickering streetlight outside. Nothing. When I stepped back inside, the faint scent of cedar and something else, something wild, earthy, and ancient, lingered in the air. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the events of the day washing over me like a tide I could not resist. The fleeting glimpses, the shadows that seemed to notice me, the pull I felt from somewhere beyond my understanding, all of it whispered a truth I couldn't deny. I was no longer just me. Something or someone had entered my life, and the quiet rhythm of my ordinary days had been broken. There was a promise in the air, a story waiting to unfold, and though I couldn't name it, I sensed that the first page was about to be written. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I felt an unfamiliar warmth at the back of my mind, a mixture of fear and longing that tugged at the edges of my consciousness. The city outside murmured in the dark, the rain still pattering softly against the windows. And somewhere, beyond my understanding, I knew he was near, watching, waiting, patient. My heart whispered a question I dared not speak aloud. Who was he? And why did I feel, with an unshakable certainty, that my life would never be the same again? The room seemed to breathe around me, as if the walls themselves were aware of what was coming. And then, just as sleep began to tug at my consciousness, I felt it, a subtle vibration, a shift in the air, as if something powerful and ancient had crossed the threshold into my world. My eyes flew open. The moonlight, the shadows, the quiet of my room, they all seemed suddenly alive. And for the first time, I understood that the ordinary world I had known was gone, replaced by something vast, unknown, and profoundly inevitable. I didn't know what to expect next. I only knew one thing. My life was changing, and the choice to follow or run would soon be mine. The night air felt different when I stepped outside. The city had grown quiet, the usual hum of life replaced by a stillness that pressed against my skin like a soft, invisible hand. I had spent the day noticing small anomalies, fleeting glances of shadow, subtle hints that my ordinary life had shifted. But nothing had prepared me for the moment I saw him. He was there, at the edge of the park where the streetlights pooled their silver circles of light. Not walking toward me, not making a sound, just standing. His presence filled the space without effort, as if the air itself had bent to accommodate him. For reasons I couldn't explain, I felt my heartbeat quicken, a curious mixture of anticipation and something deeper, something primal and magnetic. The city around us seemed to fade into a haze, leaving only the quiet rhythm of the night and the undeniable pull between us. I took a hesitant step forward. My legs felt heavier, yet my mind urged me closer, driven by a force I didn't understand. He didn't move, and yet the world seemed to shift around him, the leaves rustling softly even when there was no wind. I realized in that strange suspended moment that this was no ordinary person. There was an energy in him, subtle and commanding, like a tide that could pull me under if I let it. "Omega," he said, his voice low and deliberate, as though he had spoken my name long before I knew it myself. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, a recognition, and it echoed in my chest with startling clarity. I froze, uncertain how he could know something so personal, something intrinsic to who I was. The sound of my own name on his lips felt like an invocation, like a call I had been waiting for without knowing it. I wanted to speak, to ask who he was, how he knew me, but the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I simply watched him, taking in the strange pull of his presence. It wasn't the kind of attraction that came from sight alone. It was deeper, more intricate, a connection that seemed to reach past the surface and touch something essential within me. I felt seen in a way that was unfamiliar, as though he could perceive the parts of me I had hidden from myself. "Why are you here?" I finally managed, my voice steadier than I expected. He tilted his head slightly, not with arrogance but with curiosity and patience. "I've been waiting," he said. There was a softness beneath the gravity of his words, an unspoken understanding that he had not come to impose, but to invite, to guide. And yet, beneath that invitation lay a tension, subtle and compelling, that hinted at a power and authority far beyond my comprehension. I stepped closer, drawn by something I could not define. Every instinct told me to be cautious, yet every instinct also told me that stepping away would be a mistake I would regret. He radiated a presence that demanded attention not with force, but with a quiet intensity that seemed to echo in the very air around us. It wasn't fear I felt. It was wonder, tinged with the smallest thread of apprehension. We stood in silence for a long moment. The world hushed around us. The moon rose higher, silver light spilling over the park and casting everything into a glow that made time feel elastic. I noticed the faintest details, not of his face or his figure, but of the way he carried himself. There was a rhythm to his stillness, a cadence to his quiet presence that was both grounding and disorienting. It made me aware of my own pulse, the way my breath caught when he tilted his head slightly toward me. "I don't understand," I admitted softly, though the words felt inadequate. "Why me? Why now?" His gaze seemed to stretch through me, steady and unwavering. "Because it is time," he said simply. That phrase, so ordinary in structure, yet so weighty in meaning, sent a shiver through me. I wanted to ask more, to probe for answers, but I sensed it wasn't the moment for questions. This was a moment for recognition, for awareness, for the slow acknowledgement of something larger than either of us. The chemistry between us was undeniable, though it was not the kind that rushed to the surface. It was subtle, quiet, yet insistent. Every heartbeat, every inhalation seemed to sync with an invisible rhythm we shared. I felt the stirrings of something unfamiliar, a trust, perhaps, or an anticipation that did not belong to my ordinary life. And even as my mind tried to reason through it, my body responded, attuned to the same energy that lingered in the space between us. Then, without warning, he stepped closer, though not threateningly. The shift in proximity was enough to make the air feel charged, as if the night itself had grown dense with possibility. I didn't flinch. Instead, I found myself leaning slightly forward, compelled by a force I couldn't name. The park around us seemed unreal, the sounds muted, the world reduced to a single moment suspended in silver light. "I am not here to harm you," he said quietly, though there was no malice in his tone. "But you will need to trust me, in ways you cannot yet imagine." I nodded, though I didn't fully understand. There was a certainty in his voice that made doubt feel almost irrelevant. I sensed a destiny threading through our encounter, one I could not yet trace, but that already seemed inescapable. And as he remained there, just outside the reach of streetlight, I realized that the ordinary life I had clung to was slipping further away. The days of quiet routines and small comforts were ending, replaced by something vast, mysterious, and profoundly compelling. When he finally turned, moving toward the shadows of the trees, I expected him to vanish completely. But the sensation lingered, an invisible tether, faint but unbreakable, connecting me to him even as he disappeared from sight. My pulse thrummed with anticipation, a mixture of curiosity and something I dared not name aloud. I knew that our encounter was only the beginning, and that the questions it raised would demand answers that would change everything I thought I knew about my life, my heart, and the world around me. I stood there, the night quiet once more, yet charged with possibilities I could not yet comprehend. Somewhere deep inside, I felt the first undeniable stirrings of destiny, pulling me toward the figure I had just met. And even as doubt whispered at the edges of my thoughts, wonder and anticipation surged in equal measure. Whoever he was and whatever his purpose, I knew one thing with certainty. My life would never be the same again. The next morning, I woke to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through my curtains. Yet the ordinary comfort of my apartment felt different. The air carried a subtle vibration, a sense of expectancy that pressed gently against my chest. I blinked against it, trying to convince myself that it was merely the residue of yesterday's strange encounter. That deep down, I sensed the first tremors of a world slowly tilting, shifting beneath my feet. As I went through my morning routine, little things began to stand out, small coincidences, fleeting sensations that made the familiar feel uncanny. My teacup trembled in my hands for no reason I could identify, and a sudden gust of wind rattled the window pane, though the day outside was still. I found myself pausing, feeling a pull toward the window, as if some invisible thread was tugging me forward. It was impossible, irrational, yet undeniable. The streets felt alive in a way I had never noticed before. Faces passed me, ordinary in every sense, but there was a rhythm to their steps, a pattern to their movements that seemed almost choreographed. Shadows stretched and shifted at the edges of my vision, and I caught myself staring longer than usual, wondering if they carried messages meant only for me. Each glance, each unexplainable flicker of light, heightened a sensation that something or someone was watching, waiting, guiding. That night, I went to bed early, hoping rest would erase the unease, but sleep brought no escape. My dreams were vivid, colored with scenes I didn't recognize yet felt intimately familiar. I walked through endless corridors of moonlight, through forests where shadows whispered secrets in languages I could almost understand. And always, there was a presence beside me, not threatening, not distant, but constant, patient, and intensely aware. I would wake moments later, heart pounding, the sensation lingering long after my eyes had opened. The following day, coincidences continued to pile like gentle hints from an unseen hand. A black cat crossed my path 3 times, pausing each time to look directly into my eyes. A single word spoken by a stranger, a warning or a welcome, I couldn't tell, resonated in my mind for hours. Even mundane tasks carried a new weight. Folding laundry, arranging books, pouring coffee, they felt like rituals with a rhythm I had never noticed before. The world itself seemed to pulse with possibility, drawing me forward into something I had never imagined. And then, there was the pull, a persistent, intangible tug at my thoughts. It was strongest at night, when the city grew quiet and shadows stretched long across my walls. I felt it in my chest, a steady pressure that seemed to beckon me toward a place I didn't yet know. The feeling was gentle, yet insistent, like a tide that would not be ignored. I found myself standing at my window, staring at the moon as though it carried a message meant for me alone. My reflection in the glass blurred with the night, and for a fleeting moment, I imagined him there just beyond the silver glow. Patient, watchful, and waiting. It was not fear I felt, but a curious mixture of anticipation and recognition, the strange familiarity of someone I had never met yet somehow already knew. I could not explain it logically, and no amount of reasoning could dismiss the way my heart stirred at the thought of him. He had entered my life quietly, without a word, without a touch. And yet the world I thought I knew had begun to shift around his presence. One evening, as I walked through the quiet streets after work, I noticed the first sign that change was becoming unavoidable. A subtle shimmer danced across the air, almost imperceptible, as though the world itself had opened a window I hadn't known existed. I blinked, and the shimmer lingered, tugging at my awareness. The sensation was familiar, echoing the dreams I had the night before, the unexplainable pull I felt whenever I thought of him. My chest tightened, and a soft shiver ran down my spine. Something was coming, something inevitable, and I was both terrified and drawn to it in equal measure. The most telling sign came in the form of a single, unremarkable object in envelope, plain and cream-colored, slipped under my apartment door. My name was written on it in a hand I did not recognize, elegant and deliberate. Inside, a note read only, "The world you know is changing. Follow the moonlight, and you will understand." My pulse raced, a mixture of excitement and apprehension flooding me. Questions collided with intuition, but beneath them all was the undeniable truth. My ordinary life had already begun to unravel. I sat on the edge of my bed, the note clutched in my hands, staring at the silver glow of the moon through my window. It seemed impossible that a single encounter, a shadow, a presence I had glimpsed only fleetingly, could ripple through my life with such force. And yet, every sense told me that I had crossed an invisible threshold. The ordinary world I had known quiet, predictable, safe was fading. Something else was here, something ancient and patient, and it was reshaping everything I thought I understood about myself, about life, and about what was possible. As I held the envelope, a realization settled into my chest like a slow sunrise. Nothing would ever be the same again. I could feel it in the steady pulse of my own heartbeat, in the subtle hum of the air around me, in the way shadows bent toward the moonlight. My world was shifting, and whether I was ready or not, I was being called into a new reality, one filled with questions I could not yet answer, possibilities I could not yet imagine, and a presence that had already begun to claim a piece of my heart. For the first time, I understood that ordinary life was no longer an option. Something beyond logic, beyond explanation, had entered my world. And as the silver light of the moon bathed my room, I whispered to myself, uncertain yet certain all at once, I am ready to follow. The night arrived quietly, draping the world in shades of silver and shadow. I found myself standing at the edge of the moonlit keep, the air alive with anticipation, a subtle tension humming beneath my skin. The Alpha King was there, waiting not in the way one waits impatiently, but with a stillness that carried centuries of patience and quiet authority. When our eyes met, I felt it. A recognition that stretched beyond words, deeper than any logic I had known. He motioned for me to follow, and I did, though my steps felt uncertain, drawn by a curiosity I could not resist. Inside the keep, the atmosphere shifted. The walls seemed to breathe, carrying the faint echo of past lives, whispered memories of those who had passed through this place before. I was aware of his presence beside me at all times, not looming, not commanding, but steady, like a silent anchor. It was comforting and unsettling all at once. I realized that the air itself seemed to respond to him, as if the building, the moonlight, even the shadows, recognized his authority. We walked in silence for a while, each step carrying a weight of anticipation I couldn't name. Then unexpectedly he spoke. "You notice more than most," he said softly, almost a murmur. "The world reveals itself differently to those who pay attention." His words wrapped around me, gentle yet commanding, and I felt a warmth that wasn't just physical, but emotional, a tether forming between us, quiet but unbreakable. I suppose I've always noticed things," I admitted, my voice hesitant. even things I couldn't explain. He smiled then, a fleeting curve of lips that carried both amusement and something else. Something deeper I couldn't define. Good, he said, because you will need that awareness where we are going. His gaze held me in a way that made the hairs on my arms rise. There was no threat in it, only an intensity that made me aware of every breath, every heartbeat, every thought. I realized I was listening to him more closely than I had ever listened to anyone. As the evening progressed, small gestures began to bridge the space between us. He would adjust the sleeve of my coat when I shivered, or move an object gently from my path. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic flair, just a quiet attentiveness that made me feel seen. I found myself glancing at him when I thought he wasn't looking, noticing the subtleties of his presence. The steadiness in the way he walked, the calm patience in his gaze, the way the world seemed to slow slightly when he was near. We stopped by a window that looked out onto the courtyard, the moonlight spilling over cobblestones and the shadowed shapes of the keep's towers. It is beautiful, isn't it? I asked softly, more to the night than to him. He didn't answer immediately, only stood beside me, the silence stretching in a way that felt comforting. Then he said, "Yes, but beauty is easier to see when it is shared." His words made my chest tighten, a gentle pull that went beyond friendship, beyond ordinary connection. I realized then that trust was forming, subtle yet undeniable, threading us together in ways I didn't fully understand. We continued to speak, our conversation simple, almost mundane at times, but each word carried a weight, a warmth, a layering of intimacy. I found myself laughing softly at his dry wit, marveling at the patience in his tone, and sensing a depth in his attention that was both exhilarating and unnerving. He listened not just to my words, but to the pauses, the hesitations, the little things I didn't say out loud. It made me feel exposed, yet safe, as if I could trust him with thoughts I hadn't even admitted to myself. At one point, he handed me a small cup of warm tea. The steam curled upward, soft and fragrant, but it was not the warmth of the beverage that touched me. It was the thought behind the gesture. I felt seen, acknowledged, valued. The ordinary kindness of sharing a cup of tea became profound under the weight of our growing connection. I realized, with quiet astonishment, that I had begun to anticipate his presence, to notice the way my heart lifted slightly when he spoke, or the way the shadows seemed less intimidating when he was near. Yet even as trust grew, there was confusion, a subtle tension beneath the surface. I didn't fully understand the rules of this world or my place within it. The connection between us felt inevitable, yet I questioned it. Was it destiny, instinct, or something else entirely? The pull toward him was undeniable, yet I wrestled with the notion that I was being swept into something far larger than myself. Still, I could not resist it, not when his presence brought both calm and wonder, challenge and comfort. Hours passed in what felt like moments. At one point, I turned to him, seeking reassurance in the quiet of the keep. "I don't understand this." "Any of it," I admitted, voice soft, almost a whisper. He placed a hand lightly on my shoulder, not heavy, not possessive, but grounding. "You will," he said. "And even if you do not understand now, you will feel it. You are stronger than you know, Omega, and this bond, it is not something you can escape, nor would you want to." His words made my heart beat faster, a mixture of fear and anticipation threading through every nerve. There was clarity in his statement, yet also mystery, a promise of trials and revelations to come. As the night deepened, I realized that our connection had grown in ways I could not yet define. It was no longer simple curiosity or fleeting fascination. I trusted him in a way that went beyond reason, and yet I was drawn to him with a force I could not resist. Each glance, each touch, Each carefully chosen word added layers to a bond that felt timeless and inevitable. Finally, just before leaving the courtyard, he paused and looked at me in a way that made the air feel charged. "Tomorrow will be different," he said quietly, almost as if testing the words in the night. "You will see why you are here, and why we were brought together. Be ready, Omega." I nodded, though my chest tightened with the weight of anticipation. "I'll try," I whispered. But even as I said it, I felt the truth settling in this bond, growing quietly but relentlessly. It was not something I could try to resist. It was something I would have to embrace, whether I understood it fully or not. As I left the courtyard, the moon casting silver shadows across the stones, I realized with a mixture of awe and fear that the ordinary world I had once known was slipping further away. Trust, warmth, and a subtle, thrilling confusion had taken its place, threading me closer to him with every heartbeat. And somewhere deep in my chest, a quiet revelation formed. This bond, unexpected, inexplicable, and profound, was only just beginning, and the nights ahead would test it in ways I could not yet imagine. The next evening, the moonlit keep seemed different, older, heavier, as if it carried the weight of every secret it had ever held. The corridors were quiet, save for the soft echo of our footsteps. I had come to expect his presence beside me, yet tonight, there was an air of solemnity I could not ignore. Something was coming, something unavoidable, and I felt it in the tightening of my chest and the tremor in my hands. He stopped in front of a large, arched door at the end of a long hallway. Its wood was dark and polished, carved with symbols I didn't recognize, yet they seemed familiar, as though they belonged somewhere deep inside my memory. He turned to me, his eyes steady and patient, but I sensed an unspoken weight in his gaze. "You are ready to know," he said softly, "to see what has been hidden from you and from the world." I swallowed hard, uncertainty twisting in my stomach. What do I need to know?" I asked, though my voice trembled. There was no fear, only a strange mixture of anticipation and awe. I sensed that this revelation would change everything I thought I understood about myself, about him, and about the world I had assumed was ordinary. He pushed the door open, revealing a chamber bathed in soft silver light, like moonlight trapped inside walls. In the center, a crystal-clear pool reflected the stars above, though there was no visible roof. The air shimmered faintly, alive with energy, as if the room itself were breathing. "This is the heart of the keep," he explained. "It preserves truth. Everything hidden, everything forgotten, is kept here until the one it concerns is ready." I stepped closer, drawn by the gentle pull of the water, feeling an almost magnetic force tug at me. I don't understand," I whispered. "Why me? Why now?" His gaze softened. "Because your life, your existence, has always been entwined with this place. You are more than you believe. You are the Omega, the key to what has been waiting to awaken." I froze, my mind spinning. The words felt heavy, impossibly important, and yet, in the pit of my heart, they resonated with a strange, undeniable truth. He guided me to the edge of the pool. "Look," he said, and as I gazed into the water, it rippled, revealing scenes that felt impossibly familiar, yet distant memories I had never lived, moments I had never consciously known, yet that seemed woven into my very being. I saw faces of ancestors, shadows of choices made long before I was born, and a presence of figure cloaked in silver light that seemed to reach across time directly toward me. My past, my family, this has something to do with me? I asked, my voice barely audible. My heart pounded as I realized the enormity of what I was witnessing. Every instinct, every memory, every unexplainable feeling that had tugged at me since the night I first glimpsed him now had a reason, a name, a purpose. Yes, he said, stepping closer. Your life has been guided, shaped, protected. All for this moment. The bond you feel between us, the pull, the connection, it is no accident. You were meant to find me, to awaken what has been lying dormant within you, waiting for the right time, for the right heart. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. The weight of realization pressed down on me, not in despair, but in awe. My life, so long ordinary, so quietly lived, had been part of something far greater. There was heartbreak in the truths I saw, the moments lost. The loneliness endured, but there was also beauty in the understanding that my existence mattered in ways I had never imagined. Why hide it all from me? I asked, my voice trembling. Why let me feel alone when it was all part of this plan? He shook his head, softly, kindly. Because you needed to be ready. You needed to choose this path, not be forced onto it. Strength is born in the quiet moments, the times you think you are alone. Now you understand why the signs, the pull, the dreams, everything was guiding you here. His voice carried both reassurance and an edge of finality. And I realized that he spoke not as a teacher, but as a guardian of truths I could barely grasp. I sank to my knees at the edge of the pool, staring into the water as it shimmered with memories, with possibilities. Every piece of my life that had seemed ordinary, every fleeting feeling of déjà vu, every shadow I had noticed, now made sense. And yet, as clarity settled in, a new question rose in my mind, one that carried both fear and wonder. If my life had been intertwined with this world all along, then what else awaited me? What challenges? What truths? What choices would I face now that I understood the path I had been set upon? He knelt beside me, close enough that I felt the warmth of his presence, the gravity of his attention. The path is never easy, he said softly. The bond we share will guide you, but it will also test you. You will face moments that will shake everything you think you know. But you are not alone. I am here, as I have always been, even when you could not see me. And then, just as I began to absorb the enormity of it, the water in the pool shimmered again, and this time, a face appeared that I recognized not as mine, nor as his, but as someone I had never met yet who had a claim to my heart, in ways I could not yet understand. The figure reached out, and I felt a pull, a tug at my very soul, as if the bonds of time and destiny were pressing in. My chest tightened and my breath caught. This changes everything, I whispered. He nodded, his expression unreadable yet tender. Yes, and you must remember, the truths you have uncovered tonight are only the beginning. Everything you believed about your life, your choices, even your heart, it will be tested. And yet, through it all, the bond between us, between the Alpha and the Omega, will endure. Stronger than any shadow, any challenge, any fear. I rose slowly, the weight of revelation settling into my bones. The ordinary world I had once known was gone, replaced by a reality layered with history, mystery, and destiny. I understood now that my life had never been my own, yet in that understanding, I also recognized a freedom I had never imagined, the freedom to embrace what I had been meant to discover, to follow the bond, and to step into a story far larger than myself. And then, as I turned toward him, a faint noise echoed from the shadows, a whisper, a footstep, a presence I had not anticipated. My pulse spiked, and I realized that the revelation, powerful and beautiful as it was, had also exposed a danger, a secret, a truth that could not be ignored. My heart pounded as I faced the Alpha King, a mixture of awe, trust, and the urgent knowledge that my life and my understanding of everything was about to change once again. The world felt unsteady the next morning. Shadows lingered longer than they should. Light bent strangely across the walls of my apartment. Every sound seemed sharper, more deliberate, as if the city itself was holding its breath. I felt it too, the subtle hum of anticipation that had been growing since the moonlit keep revealed its secrets. Something was coming, something I couldn't yet name. I stepped outside, hoping the ordinary streets would ground me. They did not. Faces blurred. Sounds shifted. A sudden gust of wind carried whispers I couldn't understand. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it, but the unease had already rooted itself inside me. My life was no longer ordinary, and I could feel the rules of this world bending around me. Bending me along with them. Then came the first choice, a subtle, almost invisible decision that tested the threads of logic and instinct. A figure appeared at the edge of my vision, cloaked in shadow. My heart screamed recognition. My mind shouted caution. I froze, torn between curiosity and fear. Every fiber of my being wanted to move toward him, to step into the unknown. Every rational thought warned me to step back, to stay safe. The Alpha King appeared beside me before I could act. "The world shifts faster than you realize," he said quietly. His gaze swept across the street, alert, watchful. "You will face moments like this often. Moments that demand choice, courage, and trust." His words pressed against me, gentle yet insistent. I nodded, though the tension in my chest made it hard to breathe. We moved together through the streets, but the city was no longer familiar. The cobblestones glimmered faintly, not with ordinary light, but with a shimmer that hinted at a hidden realm beneath reality. Doors that had always been locked stood ajar, as if inviting us to step inside. The air pulsed with energy, and I realized with a start that danger and wonder had merged. Every step was measured, every glance cautious. The ordinary rules of safety no longer applied. "Why is it changing like this?" I asked, voice tight with a mixture of awe and fear. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes scanned the streets, alert to movements I could not perceive. "This world reacts to bonds like ours," he said finally. "Your awakening has shifted the balance. You are no longer ordinary, and neither is your path. With awakening comes consequence." We reached the edge of the park, the same park where I first glimpsed him. But it was different now. Trees twisted unnaturally, leaves glimmering in silver light. Shadows pooled in corners, deep and almost sentient. I felt my pulse spike. Every instinct screamed that something dangerous lingered here. And yet, another part of me, the part drawn to him, urged me forward. A sudden sound cut through the night. A low, deliberate growl, deep and resonant. My body froze. I had never heard anything like it, yet I recognized it instantly as something primal, ancient, and aware. The Alpha King's presence tightened around me, protective, grounding, and I felt both reassured and terrified. I realized then that logic could not guide me. Only instinct, only trust, could navigate the shifting landscape. He turned to me, eyes sharp and commanding. "You must choose," he said, "to move forward or to retreat. Each step carries weight. Each choice alters the path. Trust yourself. And trust me." I swallowed hard. My chest tightened. Logic screamed to step back, to retreat to the world I knew. My heart, however, beat in unison with the pull I felt toward him, toward this mysterious, dangerous reality. Every fiber of my being whispered that stepping forward was inevitable. I stepped, and then the world shifted. A gust of wind spiraled around us, lifting leaves and shadows like a living thing. The air pulsed, and I felt an energy unlike anything I had encountered. My vision blurred briefly, then sharpened in ways that made the ordinary streets seem alien, layered with light and shadow I could feel but barely see. I realized that my very presence here was changing the environment, bending the world around me in subtle, powerful ways. The Alpha King moved closer, his hand brushing against mine, not in a touch of comfort, but in a tethering gesture that anchored me against the chaos. "Do not fear it," he said. "Fear clouds judgment. You must act with awareness, not hesitation. Every choice here matters, for you, for me, for the bond." A sudden figure emerged from the shadows, a presence I could not immediately identify. It was tall, moving silently, and yet radiating intent. My pulse leapt. My mind raced. Logic screamed retreat, yet instinct whispered forward. I was aware of the weight of my decisions, of how even hesitation could tip the balance. He tightened his hold on my arm, subtle but grounding. "Trust your heart," he whispered. His voice carried authority and warmth, urging me to follow the path only I could walk. And in that moment, I realized that the bond between us was no longer optional. It was the compass I needed to navigate this unstable world. The figure advanced, and I caught a glimpse of something familiar in the shadowed face. A memory I could not place, a connection I could not yet name. My stomach knotted. Danger and recognition intertwined, leaving me breathless and uncertain. I had to decide: stand frozen in fear, retreat to ordinary safety, or step forward into uncertainty, guided by trust and the bond that tethered me to him. Every instinct, every heartbeat screamed for action. My chest tightened, mind and body straining with anticipation. Finally, I made my choice. I stepped forward, and the world shifted again. The shadows recoiled slightly, the silver glow of the moon intensified, and the figure hesitated. My heart pounded, awareness sharpened, and I felt the undeniable truth. This choice, this step, was only the beginning. Each moment ahead would test courage, trust, and the strength of the bond between the Alpha King and me. The night stretched, tense and charged, and I realized that ordinary life had ended. My world was unstable, unpredictable, and alive. Yet, in the center of it all, anchored against the swirling uncertainty, was him, the Alpha King, calm, commanding, patient, waiting for me to follow, trusting me to make the next choice, to step forward again. And as we moved deeper into the shadows, toward the unknown that stretched beyond the park, I understood one undeniable truth. The world had shifted, and nothing, neither logic nor fear nor doubt, could undo it. I had chosen, and the consequences of that choice were only beginning to unfold. The morning light filtered through the high windows of the moonlit keep, painting the walls with a soft golden hue. For the first time in days, the world felt quiet, almost deceptively calm. I lingered near the window, tracing the patterns of sunlight with my fingertips, trying to gather my thoughts after the chaos of the night before. The events of the park, the shifting shadows, and the choice I had made still churned in my chest, leaving a mixture of exhilaration and unease. He appeared beside me silently, as he always did, yet this time there was something in his gaze, a subtle vulnerability, a hesitation that I had not seen before. It was strange, almost disarming, and it made me notice him in a way I hadn't yet allowed myself to. "You are awake earlier than usual," he said softly, the weight of his voice carrying both curiosity and care. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted, my eyes still tracing the sunlight. "There's so much to process. So much I don't understand yet." My voice trembled slightly, though not from fear, but from the intensity of the emotions rolling through me. He studied me quietly for a moment, then gestured for me to follow him down a narrow hallway that opened onto a secluded chamber. The room smelled faintly of parchment and polished stone, and in the center rested a table covered in old books and scrolls, their edges worn with age. "There are truths you must know," he said simply. Truths about yourself, and about the bond between us. I hesitated, feeling the weight of the words. What kind of truths? Truths that have been waiting for you since the beginning, he replied, his tone steady but gentle. They are part of you, part of the path you were always meant to walk. He reached for one of the books and opened it carefully. The pages glimmered faintly in the morning light, as if the knowledge contained within was alive. You have always been more than ordinary, he began. Even before we met, you were touched by forces you could not see, yet they shaped your life, guided your choices, and prepared you for what is to come. Your experiences, your instincts, the moments of déjà vu you felt, they were all signs of a bond that exists beyond time and logic. I leaned closer, my curiosity outweighing my hesitation. A bond? Between us? He nodded. Yes, it is more than affection or connection. It is a bond forged by destiny, by energy older than the world itself. It recognizes your heart, your courage, your essence. It has been waiting for you to awaken to it. I swallowed hard, the realization washing over me in a mixture of awe and disbelief. So, everything I felt, the pull, the dreams, the sense that something was missing, it was all real. More real than anything you have known, he said. And yet, even with understanding, there is much more to uncover. Your past carries shadows, experiences that shaped who you are, moments of fear and solitude that strengthened you in ways you do not yet recognize. I felt a shiver run down my spine. My past? Do you mean my family? Yes, he said. There are hidden pieces of your story, parts that have been shielded from you, not to hide the truth, but to protect you. You have endured challenges alone, grown stronger in ways unseen. That strength, that resilience is why you are here, why you can face what is coming. I stared at him, searching for clarity, for understanding. And you knew all this? That my life had been leading to this moment? He shook his head softly. I did not know every detail, but the bond knew. It guided us to each other, to this awakening, to the moment when you would be ready to see yourself fully. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, not of sorrow, but of recognition. All the moments I had felt isolated, moments I had thought were mistakes or weaknesses, now carried meaning. I could feel the depth of my own resilience, the beauty in the journey I had endured. And in that same breath, I realized that part of me had always longed for this connection, had always sensed its presence even when it was only a whisper in the shadows. He placed a hand lightly on the table, close to mine, though not touching, and said, "The truth is not just about your past, but about the choices you will make. The bond between us will be tested, and the challenges ahead will demand courage. You are capable of more than you know, Omega, because you have already carried burdens invisible to others, and emerged stronger for it." I nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. The pieces were beginning to fit together. The pull I felt toward him, the strange shifts in my ordinary world, the inexplicable guidance in my dreams. It was not coincidence. It was destiny, and it was mine to embrace. Just as I was beginning to absorb this truth, he opened another book, a smaller one, its pages worn and fragile. "There is one more thing," he said, his voice lower now, carrying the weight of both care and gravity. He turned the page, revealing a single illustration, a depiction of two figures, entwined by light and shadow, with symbols that glowed faintly in the morning light. "This," he said, "is the bond as it was foretold. It is rare, ancient, and powerful, but it comes with choice and with consequence. You must decide how you will walk this path, and what you are willing to risk to honor the connection." I felt my pulse quicken, a surge of emotion mingling with awe. The illustration seemed to pulse with energy. The figures almost alive, their light entwining in a rhythm that mirrored the heartbeat in my chest. I understand, I whispered, though the weight of responsibility pressed against my chest. I think I do. But it's overwhelming. He smiled gently, a rare softness in his expression. That is natural. To recognize the depth of your journey, the strength of your heart, and the inevitability of your bond. It is overwhelming. But it is also beautiful. You are ready. And yet, even as I felt a quiet strength settle in me, a subtle unease whispered at the edges of my consciousness. There was a twist I had not anticipated, an element of choice, of risk, that made the bond exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The truth I had uncovered was profound. Yes, but it also revealed the fragility of what I had just begun to understand. The world had shifted again, and with that shift, the stakes became clearer. Trust, courage, and the strength of my heart would determine everything that came next. I looked up at him, the light from the window catching the edges of his silhouette, and realized something undeniable. The bond between us was no longer a possibility. It was a certainty. And yet, certainty came with responsibility, with challenge, with the unknown. My heart ached with anticipation, and I understood that the next steps would demand all I had, and more than I could yet imagine. The night arrived like a slow, creeping shadow, wrapping the moonlit keep in its quiet chill. I stood by the high balcony, the city lights below twinkling like distant stars, and felt a tension I couldn't shake. My heart was a storm of anticipation and unease. Every instinct whispered that something was coming, something that would test everything I had learned, everything I had felt, everything I had become. He appeared behind me silently, as always, and I startled slightly at his presence. He did not need to speak. His gaze alone was enough to ground me. Yet tonight, even his presence felt heavy. There was a weight to his eyes I could not name, something unsaid, something unsolved, something that pressed at the very edges of my understanding. "We are nearing the night that will define the bond," he said quietly. His words were calm, but they carried the weight of inevitability. "The choices you make now will echo through every step after." I nodded, though a tightness in my chest made it difficult to breathe. I understand," I whispered, though my mind screamed in conflict. Part of me longed to trust him completely, to surrender to the bond without hesitation. But another part, the part one had nurtured in quiet caution for years, resisted. Fear clashed with desire, doubt tangled with instinct, and the tension coiled in my chest like a living thing. We moved through the keep together, though the silence between us was heavy. The halls seemed narrower, shadows deeper. I noticed every flicker of movement, every subtle shift of air, every faint whisper that carried through the stone corridors. My senses were sharper than ever, heightened by anticipation, by fear, by the bond that pulsed quietly between us. And then, it happened. A sudden noise, a door slamming somewhere deep in the keep, echoed through the hallways. My heart leapt, and I felt a rush of adrenaline that made my knees weak. He moved instantly, protective, alert, and yet he did not pull me back. Instead, he guided me forward, his presence steadying, yet the tension in his expression mirrored my own uncertainty. "I don't know what's happening," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "It feels dangerous." "Danger is not always visible," he replied. "It is subtle. It creeps in through doubt, through hesitation, through the choices we fear to make. You must trust your heart, even when it trembles." I nodded again, though I could feel the tremor in my voice, the hesitation in my steps. Every instinct screamed caution, every heartbeat demanded retreat, but But the bond, strong, unyielding, undeniable, pulled me forward. I realized with a quiet shock that this tension, this fear, was a test of its own. Not just of courage, but of trust, of resilience, of the willingness to embrace what was inevitable. We reached a chamber I had never seen before, illuminated by a single shaft of moonlight that spilled through a high window. The room was empty, yet the air was thick with expectation. Shadows seemed to shift in the corners, alive in ways I could not fully comprehend. I swallowed hard, realizing that the bond between us made me acutely aware of every subtle movement, every unspoken thought, every hidden emotion. He turned to me then, his eyes locking with mine. "This is the moment where paths diverge," he said, voice low and measured. "You may step forward with trust, or you may falter. The choice is yours." My chest tightened. I wanted to step forward. I wanted to embrace the bond completely, to surrender to the connection that had grown between us through trust, shared moments, and unspoken understanding. Yet fear lingered, subtle and insistent, whispering caution, reminding me of all that could be lost, all that was unknown. I felt a sudden pull, as if the room itself were urging me toward a decision. Shadows moved more distinctly now, forming shapes I could not fully identify. My instincts screamed, my mind argued, and my heart whispered a singular truth. I was not ready to lose him. Not now, not ever. And yet, fate has its own timing. A sudden surge of wind rushed through the room, extinguishing the faint light and plunging us into shadow. I gasped, reaching instinctively for him, only to realize his hand had retreated just slightly. A barrier I could not cross. The pull of the bond remained, but a distance unexpected, painful, had opened between us. What's happening?" I asked, panic rising, my voice trembling. "The bond tests us," he said, his tone calm but edged with tension. "Even the strongest connection can face uncertainty. Tonight, you will feel the weight of choice, the strain of fear, and the pull of what you cannot yet see. It is necessary." I realized then that this rising tension, the fear, the uncertainty, the hesitation, was not merely external. It was internal, a reflection of the struggle within myself. Every beat of my heart, every thought, every feeling was magnified by the bond. Love, trust, fear, and destiny collided inside me, leaving me breathless, dizzy, and unsure. The shadows coalesced further, forming indistinct shapes that pressed at the edges of my awareness. My chest tightened as the Alpha King stepped closer, his presence both protective and urgent. "You must decide, Omega. Trust the bond, or risk losing it." I closed my eyes, willing clarity to come. Every memory, every feeling, every lesson from the past nights flashed through my mind. The quiet moments of trust, the small gestures of care, the unspoken understanding that had grown between us. And yet doubt lingered, like a shadow I could not dispel. When I opened my eyes, the room was empty once more. The shapes had vanished. The tension remained, a tight knot in my chest. He stood a few steps away, expression calm but unreadable. I realized then that the first fracture had appeared, not in him, not in the bond, but in the fragile certainty of our world. I wanted to reach for him, to close the gap, to affirm that nothing could break what we had built. But the fear, the sense of impending danger, the unknown, the weight of choice held me back. I took a hesitant step forward, then another, and yet the distance seemed to stretch further. Impossible to bridge. The night ended with the quiet ache of separation, though we stood within the same room. I felt the rising tension in every fiber of my being, love tested, trust questioned, hope stretched thin. And as I looked at him, I realized that nothing would ever be ordinary again. The world had shifted irreversibly. Our bond, though unbroken, had been tested, and the coming nights promised more challenges, more trials, and more moments that would force me to confront the deepest truths of my heart. I left the chamber with a heavy chest, the echo of his presence lingering, a reminder of the delicate balance between connection and uncertainty. The bond remained, but the night had shown me how fragile it could feel in the face of fear, choice, and destiny. And as I stepped into the quiet halls of the keep, I knew one undeniable truth. The rising tension was only the beginning, and the world we were building together would demand every ounce of courage, trust, and love I had to give. The night had fallen heavier than ever, thick and unyielding, draping the moonlit keep in shadows that seemed almost alive. Every corner whispered of anticipation. Every flicker of candlelight trembled with unspoken warnings. I could feel the weight of what was coming in my chest, each heartbeat hammering like a drum of fate. Tonight would not be ordinary. It could not be. The air itself vibrated with tension, charged with possibilities, danger, and the undeniable pull of the bond that tied me to him. He appeared at the edge of the hallway, framed by the silver light spilling from the moon above. His expression was unreadable, solemn, commanding, yet beneath it lingered something tender, almost fragile. I realized, in that moment, that he too bore the weight of tonight's events. The same unspoken fear, the same unrelenting responsibility. I stepped forward, hesitant, and he inclined his head slightly, a silent invitation and warning at once. "You are ready," he said softly. But the calmness in his voice belied the storm I could feel just beneath the surface. "Tonight, the bond will be tested like never before. You will face choices that demand courage, trust, and sacrifice. Every step matters. Every heartbeat matters." I nodded, though my stomach twisted with apprehension. The hall stretched before me like a tunnel of shadows, the light bending strangely around corners, the air almost humming with energy I could sense but not name. Each instinct screamed caution. Each emotion pulled me forward. And somewhere in the collision of fear and desire, I realized this confrontation was not merely about the world outside. It was about the truth within me, the depth of the bond, and the courage I had yet to fully claim. The first trial presented itself without warning. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and commanding, radiating a presence both familiar and alien. My pulse surged, my breath caught. Yet instinctively I did not step back. The Alpha King moved closer, a shield in every gesture, a tether to safety in every heartbeat. "Do not hesitate," he said. "The choices you make now will define everything." The figure spoke, voice echoing through the hall, smooth, calm, but with a weight that pressed on my chest. "You cannot protect what is not willing to stand with you," it said. "Are you prepared to face the truth of your bond, the reality of your heart?" I hesitated, every nerve alight with tension. This was no ordinary question, it was a challenge, a test. And I realized with a shiver that the outcome depended on my own courage and clarity. My eyes flicked to the Alpha King, who simply nodded, silent encouragement that held more weight than any words. "I am ready," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. The moment I spoke it, I felt a shift, an almost imperceptible ripple of energy that vibrated through the floor, through the walls, through me. It was the bond responding, acknowledging, and strengthening. The shadows around the figure stirred, forming shapes that danced and twisted, almost sentient, almost alive. I felt fear claw at me, a cold, sharp awareness of the unknown pressing in. Yet another feeling rose alongside it, determination. The bond between us pulsed, steady and unyielding, reminding me that I was not alone, that courage was not simply mine to claim, but ours to wield together. "Face it," the figure said again. stepping closer. Face what you have denied, what you have feared, what you have yet to accept. Only then will the bond endure. My chest tightened. I could feel the weight of every choice I had made leading to this moment, every step toward understanding, every small act of trust that had nurtured the connection between us. And I understood, with a quiet shock, that tonight demanded more than trust. It demanded clarity of heart, bravery of spirit, and the willingness to sacrifice comfort for truth. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes briefly, feeling the Alpha King's presence at my side, a constant anchor. And then I opened my eyes and stepped forward. The shadows shifted as I did, recoiling slightly, recognizing my resolve. The figure's gaze softened for a fraction of a second, acknowledging the courage I had claimed in the face of uncertainty. The Alpha King reached for my hand, his grip firm, grounding, tethering me to the bond we shared. I felt strength flow from him, from the connection, from the certainty that we were facing this trial together. Fear remained, yes, but alongside it surged determination, hope, and the realization that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. Now, he whispered, voice low, carrying weight and warmth. Step beyond the doubt. Step into the truth of your heart. And I did. I moved forward, letting the bond guide me, letting courage overshadow fear. The figure in the shadows seemed to dissolve with each step, leaving only a lingering echo of challenge and recognition. The hall brightened subtly, the tension easing but not disappearing, as if the world itself acknowledged the bravery I had claimed tonight. Yet, just as relief began to settle, a new presence entered the room, one I did not anticipate. The air shifted violently, colder now, heavier, pressing against us like a living force. My heart leapt into my throat. The Alpha King's expression hardened, his protective instincts flaring instantly. This is unexpected, he murmured, eyes narrowing toward the source. The shadows lengthened, twisting into forms more solid, more menacing, yet still distant enough that their full nature remained hidden. I felt a chill race down my spine, the pulse of uncertainty and danger intensifying. The trial had been passed, yes, but another challenge was already unfolding, one that neither of us could ignore. He reached for me again, and our hands met with a force that sent warmth and reassurance through my body. Whatever comes next, he said, his voice steady, unwavering, we face it together. But the night is far from over, and the stakes have just become higher than either of us expected. I looked toward the encroaching shadows, toward the unknown that waited beyond the flickering light. My chest tightened, breath shallow but steady, heart pounding with anticipation, fear, and determination. The trial had revealed courage, trust, and the depth of the bond, but it had also opened a door to something darker, something more challenging, something that would demand everything I had and more. And then, in a moment that froze my very being, the shadows surged forward, coalescing into shapes that loomed impossibly tall, faces indistinct yet full of intent. I felt my hands tremble slightly, though the bond anchored me firmly. My heart beat in unison with his, steady, strong, unyielding. But even as I drew courage from that connection, I knew one undeniable truth. The confrontation was not over. The true test, the ultimate choice, was still ahead. The hall stretched before us, dark, uncertain, and alive with possibility. I realized, with a mixture of fear and awe, that the coming moments would define everything: the bond, our path, and the fate of the journey we had begun together. And in that instant, I understood that the night had only just begun, and the dramatic confrontation had reached a cliffhanger that would change everything. The night had deepened into something almost sacred. a hush falling over the moonlit keep that carried the weight of inevitability. Every shadow, every flicker of candlelight, every whisper of wind seemed charged with expectation. My chest tightened, not from fear alone, but from the sheer magnitude of what lay ahead. Everything the bond, the trials, the choices, the fragile hope we had nurtured, had led to this moment. I could feel it in every heartbeat, every tremor of my skin, every pulse of the air around me. He stood beside me, as steady as ever, yet I noticed subtle tension in his posture, the flicker of doubt he never let others see. His gaze met mine, deep, unwavering, pulling at the very essence of me. "Tonight is the culmination," he said softly. "The bond, our connection, everything we've built, everything will be tested. You must trust yourself as much as you trust me." I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over me. Trust, courage, love, fate, all intertwined, all demanding clarity, all insisting I rise beyond hesitation. I felt the bond thrumming between us, steady yet insistent, a reminder that we were stronger together than apart. Yet even with that certainty, my heart quivered. The emotional stakes had never been higher, the tension never sharper. The shadows in the hall stretched and shifted, coalescing into forms that were both familiar and foreign. Shapes of past trials, of fears and doubts, flickered at the edge of my vision. They were not enemies, not exactly, but they embodied the weight of choice, the consequences of hesitation, the cost of fear, the sacrifices required by love and destiny. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself, and let the bond guide my movements. "This is your choice," he said quietly, his hand brushing against mine, not a touch of possession, but a tether of reassurance. "Face the truths you have carried alone. Face the fears that have lingered in the shadows. Only then can the bond endure fully." I closed my eyes briefly, letting memories and emotions flood in. Every quiet moment of trust, every shared glance, every heartbeat of connection came together in a single pulse. I saw the times I had doubted myself, the times I had questioned the bond, the times I had feared the unknown. And I realized that the only way forward was to embrace all of it, the light, the shadow, the love, and the fear without reservation. When I opened my eyes, I saw him standing there, unwavering, the Alpha King whose presence had become a constant in my life, whose bond had guided me through trials and uncertainties. The shadows around us recoiled slightly, as if recognizing the strength of my resolve. And in that moment I understood the final truth. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward in spite of it. A sudden surge of energy pulsed through the chamber, vibrating in the air, in the floor, in my very bones. The forms in the shadows solidified, no longer abstract reflections of challenge, but a mirror of everything we had faced together. The doubts, the fears, the moments of separation, the nights of uncertainty. I felt a wave of emotion rise inside me. Love, trust, fear, hope, determination, and an overwhelming awareness of the bond that tethered me to him. "Step forward," he whispered, his voice both command and encouragement. "Do not let hesitation define this moment. You are stronger than you realize, and the bond is stronger still." I took a breath and moved, letting the energy of the room, the strength of the bond, and the culmination of my own courage guide me. The shadows shimmered, then parted, revealing a pathway of silver light that led toward the center of the chamber. I followed, each step deliberate, each heartbeat steady, each breath a promise to trust, to love, to embrace the destiny that awaited. When I reached the center, the Alpha King took my hands in his, grounding me, connecting us in a way that was more than physical. It was emotional, spiritual, and irrevocable. The energy around us pulsed, a tangible force that recognized the union of courage and heart, of choice and trust, of love and destiny intertwined. You have faced every doubt, every fear, every shadow, he said, voice resonant. And in doing so, you have proven the depth of your heart, the strength of your courage, and the power of this bond. But to complete the transformation, one final step is required, a sacrifice, not of life, but of certainty. You must release what no longer serves you, embrace what cannot be undone, and trust in the path that lies ahead. I hesitated, heart hammering, mind swirling with the weight of what he asked. To release certainty was to surrender control, to accept the unknown, to embrace the vulnerability that had both terrified and exhilarated me throughout this journey. I could feel every instinct screaming caution, yet every heartbeat whispered trust. Every shadow, every trial, every fear had led to this moment. Slowly I exhaled, and with that breath I let go. I released the doubts, the hesitation, the fear that had held me back. I embraced the bond fully, without reservation, without question. And in that act I felt a shift, subtle at first, then profound. Energy pulsed through me, through him, through the chamber. A symphony of connection, courage, and undeniable truth. He drew closer, eyes locking with mine, and for the first time, the bond felt complete, not just a force guiding us, but a shared strength, a living connection that pulsed with its own rhythm. You have done it, he said softly, pride and warmth lacing every word. The bond is no longer a question. It is our truth. And yet, even in the triumph, a subtle tension lingered, a quiet whisper that the journey was not yet over. The transformation had been profound, but the future remained uncertain. A path stretched wide with possibilities both wondrous and daunting. I realized then that sacrifice had not been the loss of something tangible, but the release of fear and doubt, the surrender to trust and love, and the courage to face what lay ahead without hesitation. We stood together in the center of the chamber, hands entwined, hearts synchronized, the bond shimmering around us like a living force. I felt a warmth, a clarity, a profound sense of connection that transcended the ordinary, that surpassed logic, and that anchored me in a truth I had only glimpsed until now. Love, trust, and courage could create a strength beyond imagination. And in that moment, as the moonlight poured through the high windows, illuminating us in silver radiance, I understood the ultimate truth of this journey. Transformation is not about escaping fear or avoiding challenge it. It is about embracing it fully, together. And though the night had tested everything, it had also revealed the depth of heart, the power of the bond, and the certainty of the connection that would guide us forward. Yet, as we lingered in that charged silence, a subtle shiver ran through the chamber, a quiet reminder that destiny still held surprises. The journey was far from over. Choices remained, challenges awaited, but the emotional peak had been reached. The bond had been proven, and together, we were ready for whatever the final night would bring. The first light of dawn crept across the horizon, brushing the moonlit keep with hues of rose, gold, and soft amber. I stood at the balcony, letting the warmth of the sun kiss my face, and felt a quiet peace I had not known in months. The trials, the tension, the fear, and the uncertainty, all of it had led to this moment. And yet, it was more than a moment. It was a culmination of every heartbeat, every choice, every step I had taken along the path that destiny had laid before me. He appeared beside me, silent as always, but this time there was no weight of trials in his posture. Instead, he radiated calm strength, a steady presence that had become my anchor, my compass, my constant. Our hands brushed together, and I felt the bond pulse gently, a reminder of everything we had endured and everything we had chosen to embrace. "We made it," he said softly, the words carrying pride, relief, and a quiet joy. I nodded, feeling tears of gratitude prick my eyes. Yes, together. Every step, every challenge, it was all for this. He smiled, a rare, unguarded expression, and in that smile I saw all the trust, care, and unwavering connection that had carried us through darkness and uncertainty. There were no words to capture the depth of what we had shared. It was felt in the silent rhythm of our hearts, in the steady thrum of the bond that tied us beyond mere understanding. The keep, bathed in the gentle morning light, felt transformed. Shadows no longer carried tension or fear. They were softened by warmth and clarity. Even the air seemed lighter, filled with the subtle hum of possibility and renewal. Every stone, every corner, every echo of past trials now bore witness not to struggle, but to triumph, to love, to the endurance of heart and spirit. I turned to him fully, letting the golden sunlight fall across his face. "I feel whole," I said, voice trembling with quiet wonder. I faced fear, choice, and doubt. And yet, I've never felt more certain of anything in my life. He took my hands in his, holding them with gentle certainty. "And that is the power of the bond," he said. "It is not merely about connection. It is about growth, courage, trust, and the willingness to face whatever the world asks of you. You embraced it fully, and in doing so, you've claimed your own strength, your own destiny." I exhaled slowly, letting the words sink in. The lessons of the past nights, the fears and challenges, the doubts I had carried, they no longer held power over me. Instead, they had shaped me, strengthened me, and guided me to the clarity I now felt. The bond between us had not simply endured. It had become a living force, steady, unwavering, and luminous. We lingered in quiet companionship, letting the morning stretch around us. The world outside the keep was waking. Birds singing softly, wind rustling through distant trees, and yet our little world remained a bubble of calm, a haven shaped by trust and shared courage. There was no need for words. Everything that mattered was present in the gentle squeeze of his hand, the shared breath between us, the rhythm of hearts synchronized in quiet understanding. Then, he reached into his coat and produced a small, folded letter. "There is something for you," he said, offering it with a careful reverence. I took it, fingers trembling slightly, and unfolded the delicate paper. The handwriting was familiar yet new, carrying the weight of intent, thought, and feeling. It was a simple note, yet every word resonated deeply, echoing the journey we had taken together. "For every shadow you have faced, for every fear you have overcome, for every choice you have made with courage and heart, know that you are seen. You are cherished, and you are home." Tears streamed down my face as I read it, each word wrapping around my heart like a warm embrace. I looked up at him, and his expression mirrored my own, a quiet joy, a shared understanding that transcended language, transcended challenge, and transcended the trials that had shaped us. We stood there together, the morning light wrapping around us, and I realized that every test, every moment of uncertainty, every heartbeat of doubt had led us to this serenity. Love, trust, destiny, they had all converged, bringing clarity, transformation, and peace. The journey had been long, challenging, and uncertain, yet the resolution was perfect in its quiet, profound completeness. As I folded the letter and tucked it close to my heart, I felt a final, subtle shift in the bond. It was no longer a pulse of testing or trial. It was a steady, enduring current of trust and connection, a promise of strength and presence that would carry us into the days ahead. I felt a deep gratitude not just for the bond itself, but for the courage to embrace it fully, for the love that had guided me, and for the destiny that had unfolded exactly as it was meant to. He placed a hand lightly on my shoulder, a grounding gesture filled with warmth. "The journey may continue," he said softly. "But tonight, today, this moment, it is ours. And that is enough." I leaned slightly into him, feeling the calm certainty that comes only after storms have passed, after trials have been faced and hearts have been proven true. The keep, the bond, the sunlight, the letter, all of it coalesced into a single, profound truth. Love, courage, and trust could endure anything. And in that endurance we found our freedom. Finally, I turned back to the balcony, watching the sunrise fully over the horizon, spilling light across the land. Its warmth touched everything, the keep, the shadows, the distant trees, and in that light, I saw the reflection of our journey, the culmination of choice, trust, and heart. The image lingered, the first rays of a new day, a letter held close, and two figures standing side by side, ready to face the world together, unafraid, and bound by a love and destiny that could never be broken. And as the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in golden hues, I felt a quiet, unshakable truth settle in my soul. We were free, not from the bond, not from challenges, but free in courage, in love, and in the certainty that whatever came next, we would face it together. The morning air carried a gentle promise, a new beginning, and as I held his hand and let the sunlight warm us both, I knew that the journey had ended not with a finale, but with a horizon wide open, full of possibility, trust, and the enduring strength of a love that had weathered every trial. And in that final, lingering moment, the sunrise shone directly on us, a single, perfect image of hope, unity, and the power of the bond that had brought two hearts together, forever.